The greatest killer in the ancient world died face down in the mud. It did not happen in single combat. It did not happen crossing swords with a worthy king. Achilles, the undisputed terror of the Trojan War, was brought down by an arrow fired from a distance, by a prince who preferred the safety of a bow to the risk of a blade. Guided by the hand of the god Apollo, the shaft found the only vulnerable flesh on Achilles' body, his heel. The poison of the bronze tip worked quickly. The man who had slaughtered armies, who had dragged the corpse of Hector behind his chariot, simply collapsed. His death sent a wave of cold panic through the Greek lines. Achilles was not just a soldier, he was their ultimate weapon. Without him, the walls of Troy seemed suddenly, impossibly high. But before they could mourn, there was the matter of his body and his armor. It was not normal bronze. The armor of Achilles had been forged by Hephaestus, the god of fire. It was a masterpiece of divine metal, the ultimate mark of a king. The Trojans rushed forward to hack it from his corpse. The Greeks fought desperately to drag him back. In the chaos, two men held the line. Ajax the Great, a man built like a fortress, heaved the massive, blood-slicked body of Achilles onto his shoulders and carried him toward the ships. Beside him, Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, fought a bloody retreat, holding the Trojan spears at bay. They made it to the camp, but saving the body was only the beginning of the tragedy. The body was washed, the funeral pyre was lit, and then the armor was piled in the center of the command tent. The firelight caught the divine gold. It was no longer just protection, it was a crown. Whoever wore the armor of Achilles would be acknowledged as the greatest surviving warrior in Greece. There were only two men who had a claim, the two who had saved the body. To Ajax, the law was blood and iron. He was the tallest, he was the strongest. For 10 years, he had been the unbreakable wall of the Greek army. When the Trojans breached the camp and tried to burn the ships, it was Ajax who fought them off with a ship pole, jumping from deck to deck, killing until his arms went numb. He did not scheme, he did not retreat. He simply bled for Greece. To Ajax, merit was measured in scars. But the Greek commanders, Agamemnon and Menelaus, decided to hold a council. They would vote on who deserved the prize. They sat in a circle. Ajax stood before them. He did not offer a speech. His body was his argument. He pointed to the ships he had saved. He pointed to the battlefield. He glared at Odysseus in heavy, suffocating silence. Let the blades decide, his presence demanded. Throw the armor into the enemy lines and see who is brave enough to bring it back. He sat down, confident. The truth was obvious. Then the liar stood up. Odysseus understood something that Ajax did not. They were in the 10th year of a siege. Pure strength had failed to break the walls of Troy. Achilles was dead. Brute force was no longer enough. The kings were tired, frightened, and desperate for a way out. They did not need another hammer. They needed a knife in the dark. While Ajax sat in silence, Odysseus filled the tent with noise. He did not speak of pure combat. He weaponized his tongue. With soft, lethal precision, he stripped Ajax of his glory. He painted the giant not as a hero, but as a beast of burden. A dumb, blunt instrument useful only when directed by a sharper mind. Odysseus claimed that intellect commanded the spear, and therefore the man of intellect was the master of the man of blood. Every word was a blade slipped between the ribs of Ajax's honor. It was a public butchery, executed entirely through rhetoric. The kings listened. They were swayed by the silver tongue. When the stones were cast into the helmets to count the votes, the verdict was clear. The armor of the gods was handed to Odysseus. Ajax did not scream. He did not draw his blade in the council tent. He walked out into the dark. But inside his chest, something fundamental shattered. It was not just the loss of the gold. It was the breaking of the only law he knew. He had stood in the vanguard, and he had been cast aside for a liar. The kings he had protected had disgraced him in front of the entire army. That night, grief hardened into a cold, unholy fury. He took up his massive sword. He would not wait for morning. He would go to the tents of Agamemnon, Menelaus, and Odysseus. He would butcher them in their sleep. He would wash away the disrespect with the blood of his own commanders. He stepped out into the blackness, his mind fixed on murder. But the gods guard their favorites. Athena, the goddess of wisdom and the patron of Odysseus, saw the giant moving through the dark. She knew he was unstoppable. She could not match his brute strength, so she struck his mind. She descended and pressed a hand of cold, heavy dread over Ajax's eyes. This was no mortal sickness. It was a divine curse. She twisted his perception, warping the camp around him. As he approached what he thought were the command tents, he was actually walking into the pens where the Greeks kept the captured livestock, the cattle and sheep meant for the army's rations. In his god-blinded state, Ajax saw the animals as men. He saw a massive ram and thought it was Agamemnon. He saw a bull and thought it was Menelaus. With a roar of vengeance, the greatest warrior of Greece fell upon the herd. He hacked through flesh and bone. He cleaved the heads off sheep, his sword rising and falling in the mud, screaming the names of the kings as he slaughtered defenseless animals. Blood sprayed across his chest. He captured a large ram, tied it up, and dragged it back to his tent. In the dim light of his own shelter, believing the beast was Odysseus, he beat it with a leather strap, laughing at his triumph over the man who had stolen his honor. He had his revenge. He stood in his tent, breathing heavily, soaked in gore, satisfied. Then Athena lifted the veil. The divine fog evaporated. The shadows settled. The ringing in his ears stopped. The copper stench of animal blood and wet wool filled his lungs. Ajax blinked. He looked down at his hands. He looked at the floor of his tent. There was no dead king. There was only a mutilated sheep. He stepped outside into the dawn light. The Greek camp was waking up. Soldiers were gathering near the pens, staring in absolute horror at the carnage. Hundreds of animals, hacked to pieces. And standing in the middle of it, covered in animal filth and gore, was Ajax. The realization was physical, a sickness in his stomach that crushed him like a falling mountain. He had not avenged his honor. He had become a joke. The man who had terrified the armies of Asia had spent the night warring with cattle. The shame was absolute, suffocating, and permanent. The kings would not fear him now. They would pity him, or they would laugh. He fell to his knees in the blood-soaked mud. He wailed. It was a sound that made the soldiers who heard it look away. Ajax knew the rules of the ancient world. A man could survive a lost battle. A man could survive a grievous wound. But a man of honor could not survive absolute ridicule. There was no path forward. His name was ruined forever. He took his sword, a blade given to him long ago by Hector as a gesture of respect between enemies. He walked away from the camp, down to the desolate edge of the beach. He dug a hole in the wet sand. He buried the hilt of the sword deep, packing the earth around it so the blade stood straight up, the sharp edge pointing toward the sky. He did not pray for forgiveness. He prayed to the Furies for vengeance upon the Greek commanders. Then, the strongest man in the world threw himself forward. The iron drove upward through his chest, piercing his heart, ending his life in a single brutal motion. The blood of Ajax soaked into the sand of Troy. With his death, the era of the heroes ended. Achilles was dead. Ajax was dead. The men of pure strength, the men who fought in the open light of day, were gone. The Greek army was left in the hands of the speakers, the schemers, the men of shadows. The physical war was over. The armor of Achilles now belonged to Odysseus, and it would not be a spear or a shield that finally broke the walls of Troy. It would be a hollow wooden horse built on a lie. If you want to hear the dark, unspoken truths behind the old legends, subscribe to Mythkipedia. The old gods are still watching.